we're live. We
I
will
just
be
see I just see preview mode.
okay. Oh, what happened? Oh, hello, hello. How are you? How's everybody doing? Okay, so I have the pleasure today to be here with Maya Vujinovic. Maya, are you with us right now? We were having a conversation right before we started, and I think she dropped, but she'll be coming back soon. We haven't done any of these lives in quite a few weeks, so we're excited to have a conversation with her. I think she's back. She's right here. Hello,
Yeah,
how are you?
yeah, I
I
know we've
lost
been
you for a
having
second.
yeah, all good, all good.
All right, Maya, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I mean, a little unfortunately anxious with the whole Trump announcement, and
Oh, okay.
just hope that I think honestly everybody spoke with in the last couple of days has kind of been on pause.
Mhm.
So just a little bit anxious, I think, and I feel like there's so much innovation in the world and so many amazing things in the world, and yet here we are with this situation. So yeah, but otherwise good.
Yeah, I mean, well, the whole situation is quite unfortunate. But we're here to learn about who you are, what you've been doing, how you got here. So we would like to learn more about your past, your experience, and what you guys been working on. So thank you very much, number one, for taking the time to have this conversation. And please, Maya, tell me where are you from? Where are you from? Uh, and then I would like to hear, all the studies that you've done. You know what I mean? Your first companies, uh, from the beginning, in a nutshell. How will you, share with us who is Maya?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. You have such a great energy, and I hope this becomes quite big for you as well. So, my name is Maya Vujinovic. I am originally ex Yugoslavian. My parents have moved to the US when I was very little, and I grew up between a few places in Europe and the US. And then at a young age, I also ventured into Africa and Latin America, where I did some pretty cool things at an early part of my career. So, I started really on the ground floor, right? In early 2000s, I moved to Africa and Latin America, and I built mobile payments and energy power plants, which, by the way, is coming full circle now because of AI and
Yeah.
energy development and everything else. So that's kind of cool in my career where these are now really becoming clear. The real physical infrastructure in markets where the banking system barely reached most of the people was an exciting place to be. And I think it gave me a perspective on, why I entered, for example, Bitcoin in 2010, why I paid attention to, energy development as well. And I saw in Africa what most people didn't see at the time, which is this leapfrogging population, right? And mobile payments in sub-Saharan Africa weren't just a little experiment in Silicon Valley, right? They were just really how people live their life and how they go by. So from there, I moved more into institutional. I in Africa and Latin America, I acquired about $1 billion of assets across telecom and energy, and then I moved more into institutional at General Electric,
Mm.
where I led their first blockchain pilots between JP Morgan and GE. And that was my vision early days where I thought, on Ethereum blockchain, because that's what was popular at the time. And I actually met Joe Lubin and Vitalik and brought him into GE to really talk about potentials of smart contracts.
Oh
And
wow.
that really on the IoT devices and kind of futuristic stuff. I mean, I already growing up was quite a nerd around sci-fi and space. And
Mm.
so for me, it wasn't very hard to connect these dots. And so G was, already ahead with digital twinning. They really popularized digital twin, a concept of a digital twin. And so it was very easy for us to build a blockchain as a service internally. We were the first organization in the world because of something that I pushed internally. And then came back full, obviously Circle, left Chi a while back, started my own fund. And I forgot to mention just before, into G in 2013, I facilitated a first bank for Tether because, as you probably remember, an audience knows that nobody wanted to bank Tether at the time, and I helped acquire the first bank that would bank Tether, and then started my own fund, kept investing not just in crypto, but in longevity and in space exploration, which I'm very passionate about both. And then now, currently, I'm the CEO of digital assets of FG Nexus. It's a $200 million Ethereum DAT, digital asset treasury, where things are just absolutely converging in multiple ways.
Wow, yeah, that's a very interesting background. I'm very interested. Well, I have quite a few questions, but one of the questions I have been thinking about is the work that you have done in Africa and Latin America. I'm from Colombia, so I totally understand that digital payments can revolutionize the way we do businesses for everybody, right? Because all of a sudden, kind of like I don't know the case, Salvador, where from one day to the next, everybody had a digital wallet, right, and was able to have a
Yeah.
bank, especially if you live in a remote connection that you don't have access to that physical bank. These digital payments, these cryptocurrencies or stable coins have allowed many people in rural areas to all of a sudden have a bank and have access to all those resources that for years they were not really they didn't have access to. So I would like to hear from you how this technology has changed places like Africa and Latin America where you have worked, where you have lived. So you have experienced firsthand how this is changing and what is the potential in the near future for these places to evolve financially thanks to these technologies.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool question. I think if you asked very crypto like OGs and really smart people, right, most of them will tell you that stable coins are used primarily for trading in crypto. And then second use case is what you mentioned. Um, because in the Western markets, right, there isn't a large use case for stable coins yet. But in those markets, right, it's massive. And this is where it gets interesting because um, in those markets, Yaro, people are not waiting for regulation. As I
Yeah.
said, this is not some cute experiment, right? They're really using these stable coins every day for food, for utilities, for everything else. And in 2026, I think early this year, I read like a global crypto adoption index. Um, it has India as a number one, by the way. I think Nigeria is number two. And then countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana are breaking into kind of top 20 for the first time. So stablecoin adoption across sub-Saharan Africa is definitely massive, and it's surged to about 180% year over year, right? In Latin America, total, I think, stablecoin settlement volume has passed about 33 trillion in 2025. That's
Yeah.
not a small number, right?
No.
That's more than a visa processes in a year, right? In Venezuela, you have nearly, and I've been paying attention, particularly in terms of what's going on in my geopolitical background, nearly half of these smaller transactions are done in stablecoins. And then Argentina, which early days was really like a hub for crypto, for Bitcoin mining, right? Freelancers are getting paid in stablecoins and they
Yeah.
hold them on their phone instead of actually converting them to pesos that lose value overnight, right? So when you look at numbers like that, you can't just say, oh, this is a speculative asset. And yes, people like you and me and similar, right, and who understands the space, they understand that. But most of the world still kind of sees this as a joke. And reality is it's not. It's people really solving a real problem. And so when your currency is volatile, like you very well know, given that you're from Colombia, right? And when banks are charging you 6% to send that remittance, and then the corresponding bank on top of that, right, takes the days,
Yeah.
right? Stable coins become not just this nice to have. They're
Mom.
much right, exactly. So I think the demand was always there. Now really technology is just catching up with the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned remesas, right? That's how we call it in Spanish, remittances. I think you speak Spanish, right? So maybe the next interview we can do in Spanish.
Sí, sí, sí.
uh, but yeah, the remesas market is huge, right? So now you have a lot of people. I live in California. So it's a lot of people from Mexican and Salvadorian descent that obviously will use this type of technology to send money a lot faster and with lower fees, right? So how
Yeah.
do you think? Because I keep reading about all these banks coming out with their own stable coins. It seems like everybody and their grandma can actually create their own stable coins. So there's obviously that sentiment, that feeling from big banks, right, from the JP Morgans all the way down, that they need to create these stable coins to be able to settle payments a lot faster. Uh, where's all these going? I mean, I just hear stable coin and so companies creating their own coins. Like, how sustainable is this and how beneficial it is for us and for them?
Yeah, it's a very good question because everybody can fall into that group of, let's just create a stable coin, right? And everybody's creating stable. It all sounds really exciting.
Right.
I just actually talked about this at FII Priority, which is a large conference. It was one of the questions. And so number one, I think that there will be some form of consolidation, for
Mhm.
sure. Number two, I do think that the non-Western governments are waking up to a possibility of having their own stablecoin because, again, there is a reason why in the US there was a Genius Act that was passed, right? That allows the US to push the dollar globally through these, stablecoins. And so the other governments are now waking up and saying, well, could we do our own, right? What would it be backed by? And what does that actually mean? In terms of JP Morgan and those types of banks, look, there is most people won't say it that way. They're kind of political or roundabout ways. But reality is there is a huge tension between this technology and the legacy systems and the legacy kind of, holders of the financial system, right? Because the moment you and I launch a stablecoin that produces a yield and gives back a yield, right? Suddenly we can become a magnet for all these bank deposits that are in banks. And so that becomes a strange competition and a very tight one. And I think, no matter how much Jamie Dimon plays, poker face in terms of that this is not bothering him, reality is it is, right? Because fintechs can turn around to become banks tomorrow, potentially, right?
Absolutely.
If they
Yep.
have such mass distribution and they
Yep.
have the retail. So that is a possibility. And this is why you see this tug of war happening at the moment. And at the same time, I think it's a bit of a joke that we can think about some two guys in a garage can suddenly create a stable coin and compete against JP Morgan, right? I mean, crypto in general is a drop in a bucket for TradFi. And so I do think, one, there's still going to be innovation. And I think countries need to look at how they can create their own stable coins, right? If particularly if they have a lot of trade, like I see a lot of trade between, Asia and Latin America, particularly in
Mhm.
Argentina, Brazil, because of commodities. I see a lot of that in Africa as well, right? And so that's really a great use case. But at the same time, you will start to see a bit of a consolidation probably as well.
Mm, very interesting. Okay, I don't want to get into politics too much, but I do have to ask this because I mean, I don't know. Well, you have JP Morgan, you have sorry, Jamie Dimon. At one point he was saying that Bitcoin is garbage and whoever buys it is stupid, right? And now we see like the real, his real face behind this whole technology. But I also, you know, think that the United States has been very powerful because the dollar has been the global currency, right? And now, do you think there is a threat to this financial dominance because of all these technologies? In other words, you have many other countries that are obviously looking into creating or bringing their own currency, digital currencies, right, to settle payments when it comes to oil, when it comes to many other resources that, you know, are used for us to just survive, right? And now we are at war. There is a lot of, geopolitical uh, issues. Uh, and do you think at one point this can be detrimental for the dollar and for the United States when it comes to digital payments and settle payments in a global stage?
Yeah. It's a complex question. And I call this, I mean, for many years now, since I was at GE, I basically said we are entering into what I call a schizophrenic world.
Mhm.
That one week you'll feel like it's this, the next week you feel like it's something else. And that's exactly what's playing out, be it from investment point of view to how fast technology is changing, where people can really trust to invest their money. I mean, I can give you one example. Since this announcement of Trump, I know so many people that have gone into cash, right? Because of potential some kind of retaliation, right? In terms of, our cybersecurity and everything else. So people just simply don't know what's even going to happen in the next week, right?
Mhm.
Um, Someone might hear that and say, "Well, that's too simplistic. It can't just all go away like that." I do think it is happening that we are entering in a world that is not necessarily linear. And when it comes to Jamie Dimon, right, telling one story and behaving differently, I'll give you an insider story. In 2015, when I initiated conversations and I went in front of our leadership at GE and the board, and I said, "Hey, look, we need to be looking at blockchain. We need to be doing this. Here's how it really impacts your EBITDA," because the tech was just too kind of nuanced and not really on the agenda, right? And I went to do the same thing at head of treasuries at JP Morgan. They all embraced this really fast to say, we got to look at this innovation. This is definitely something that may impact us. Let's launch a sandbox. Then let's do a larger pilot, right? While publicly they were saying all the bad things about all this, right? And
Mhm.
so I knew kind of from the beginning that every time, somebody that didn't really have the inside info, I knew where JP Morgan was standing on this. In terms of Bitcoin itself, right, it is very different than the different blockchains and what potentially that technology can do. But still, there were large groups of analysts and leaders in JP Morgan that still believed in Bitcoin as a digital gold, right?
Yeah.
Because they understood that, dollar, by the way, I don't know the number. I actually looked it up the other day. I believe it was like close to a half a was it a close to $1 trillion that wasn't actually settled in USD anymore in trade, that has been settled in other currencies. So
Mhm.
countries like BRICS are choosing to use other
Right.
currencies, right? And
Yep.
so now you can argue that's going to keep growing because of geopolitical tensions and the choices, right, that the White House has made. But you could also argue opposite. Because of Genius Act, the only thing I see is, by the way, this is a fact. If you
Mhm.
give an option in Nigeria or in Argentina to pick a currency, guess what they're going to do? They're going to pick USDC and USDT. No doubt about it. And that's a USD, right? And that's a dollar because that is a stable still currency. There
Mhm.
isn't really a full on replacement that gives
Right.
that stability. It's just a fact. So you could argue kind of both ways.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely not a full replacement. And I don't
Yeah.
know if we're gonna get there or when, but there is definitely like a pattern or there is a trend there, right? Where, as you mentioned, there are like trillions of dollars that are being settled in different currencies outside the US dollar. So there is something to be said.
Yeah, and by the way, Yara, like why do we think that it's only going to be one currency, right?
Right.
Why do we think that the world is going to continue in this way of the US dollar as it was? What maybe there will be three pockets in the world, right?
Mm.
Some of them will settle in yuan, some of them will settle US dollar, some of them will settle maybe in euro. I don't know, right? But the real, or maybe Swiss franc because it has been stable. And so it takes a while to get the trade going, to get the volume going for you to have those network effects. But I don't know that we are entering anymore or that we are staying in the world of single kind of stable currency. We will have different pockets for different things, I
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to AI, let's get into this whole conversation about our artificial intelligence, which is all the hype these days, right? And just like you were early on digital payments, early on Bitcoin, you were very early on AI as well. Uh, and now we have this intersection, right, with the stable coins, cryptocurrencies, AI. Do you think AI, uh, it is kind of like a technology that will make it a lot easier for countries, for anybody in their garage, as you mentioned, to create their own banks and become more financially independent? Or is AI not really there when it comes to finances?
Yeah, great question, complicated one. We're just starting and I have been lucky in my career to have people like For example, I'll give you some names like, first of all, I was at GE for a while where I got to see machine learning on the industrial side. Companies like GE and similar have been doing, machine learning for a very, very long time before, any of us can spell artificial intelligence, right? And so it was all focused on industrial. So that gave me very deep insights of what could be possible, being part of those teams and learning from those people. The second, I've learned very early from a friend of mine called Stephen Messer. He runs Collective Eye. It's an incredible AI company that he's been doing for a very long time. So I had early ins to some of this. And so I definitely don't think that we are there yet with AI. And let me maybe put it in a kind of a simplest ways. AI agents can't overthink it. Okay. But they can own their own crypto wallets or another wallet.
Mm. Mm.
And it will have to be a digital form of money, right? USDC, USDT, another
Right.
crypto. And that is really the whole ballgame. So we now have software that can browse the web, execute tasks, and then make the purchases, whatever you decide to purchase, right, on its own. But it needs payment rails. Credit cards don't really work for that. You can't hand an AI agent a Visa card, right? But you can give it a crypto wallet loaded with a stable coin and let it transact autonomously. So that kind of gives you a sense of where we're at. We're still a little bit early. However, it is moving fast, right?
Mm.
Um, I think like a couple of days ago, what was it that Ant Group
Mhm.
launched a platform called Nvita. And on that platform, AI agent holds an asset, trades it, settles it, in real time, by the way, settles the payment while using the stable coins. Coinbase recently also announced they built a protocol called X402.
Mhm.
That protocol essentially lets AI agent pay fraction of a cent per API call without any human approval, right? Google did the same. They launched their own agent payment protocol. Stripe is doing the same, right? With a company called Tempo. And then Visa has one as well. I think MasterCard is entering the game. I think they have the largest stablecoin acquisition in history, like just recently that BBNK. Um, so I do think that all of this is real. It's still going to take a little bit, and but in kind of in full scale. And AI agents, I think now, uh, I think did about 30 to 31 billion payments volume on Solana alone in 2025. And so I think it will be interesting to see how it really develops in the next just 3 years, right? So I think it's still not fully there, but it's getting there, you know? And for me, on a personal level, I think it's fascinating. AI has completely changed also how I work, how I research, how I form the questions, how I model certain scenarios, how I draft the analysis. Right now, I can look at a legal contract and do it through AI and then just go for a senior partner instead of, going for 10, 15 hours of a junior partner. I just go to one guy now for $2,000 worth of decision. Um, and so I think that's really interesting. The longevity part, which I'm interested in, right? I have an AI agents just for that. And so I do think that on a personal level, I use it a lot. And the biggest shift, I think, what is going to come, I don't believe in this full on AI doom and gloom that everybody's talking about, that we're all just going to be without jobs and we're all going to be sitting on a beach and be creative. First of all, I think we're going to have some social issues. We're going to have large unemployment of the people that are graduating, but at the same time, we are going to have more people starting different companies, and
Mhm.
you are going to start to see shorter lifespan of those entrepreneurs, meaning that you and I can agree to go create a product for the next 3-4 months and then exit it to somebody within 7 months,
Mhm.
right? Because there might not do it. We may move faster, so you're going to start to see these shorter stints.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that the biggest shift um, is just productivity. Really, for me, the biggest shift is it's that infrastructure, digital payments needs is fundamentally, like at its core, changing because the volume, speed, and the size of transactions that AI agents require looks nothing like a human payment pattern. That's the mental model that we all have to kind of, because we know exactly how we shop, we know how we deal with this. I think that AI agent payment railways is going to be completely different than what we're used to.
Yeah. You mentioned guardrails. So when it comes to a lot of these technologies, they don't have guardrails. But I mean, just in a matter of what ChatGPT came out in November 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what, barely 3 years and change, 4 years. So you had the ChatGPT moment, then you have the DeepSeek moment, right? And now you have OpenClaw. So you have all these different companies and models being released, right? That just take gigantic steps into, domains that we didn't think of, right? 3 years seems to be a very long time because we're going to see a lot of these models advance so fast and move things so rapidly. How do you adjust for things like that? Like, as an investor, as a CEO of multiple companies, right? You have a lot of decisions to be made, and you have to look forward. Where are we going to be in a year? Where are we going to be in 3, 5 years, right? But it's kind of like impossible to really know, what's going to be the next open claw and change things drastically. Is there any foundational kind of like questions that you ask yourself, in order to be ready for almost anything that may come? I know it's a hard question, but like when you go
Yeah.
to bed, it's like, okay, how can we be prepared for the next, you know, crazy model that is going to change everything that we are doing?
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't sit in one of those organizations, so that's really hard to tell. But I can tell you, I'll give you a couple examples from different ways how I think about it. There are three maybe things. One is is kind of when I look at something, is it a real infrastructure or is it just a narrative? If it's a real infrastructure, right, I have a different lens. If it's just a narrative, by the way, I think a lot of VCs lately have been look at quantum.
Mhm.
Quantum has been a narrative for years now,
Right.
right? And so I think the way the VCs are going to make money on that is part of that narrative, right? For part of the use case. Um and I think that a lot of a lot of people are going to look for that distinction. Like, is this infrastructure? How long would it last? What will be replaced with? Or is this a narrative? How long does it last? Right? People thought that only crypto had a hype. Wow, AI has a massive hype, right? Because whatever you and I create today, it will be replaced in the next 2 months, right? It
Mhm.
just depends what it is and how long it takes. So if a company is just sitting, let's say, on a token and calling itself a like a treasury company, that's not enough, right? You need operational substance, you need yield generation, you need actual product. Second is where does it converge? So I think that the best opportunities will be kind of that sit between AI, a stable coin, and a tokenization. This is more on a crypto. So if you have an overlap of tokenization, stablecoin, and AI, you probably have a really good company, right? And because to me, they're not separate markets. It's the same infrastructure stack, and they're all being built simultaneously. And that's where the kind of the power is. And a third sometimes depends what I'm looking at, depends on the use case, depends on the distribution, but does it solve a real problem? Again, in a hard market. So if it's something works in Lagos, example, or in Colombia or Buenos Aires, right? Not just in San Francisco, the use case is probably durable, right? And I, for some reason, always look at emerging markets as a proving ground because that's what the real use case is. Obviously, there are other projects, right, where you don't. But I think just because we've discussed emerging markets and stablecoins and payments, that's kind of something I'm looking at.
Got it. Okay. Uh, in terms of investments, I I believe you mentioned earlier that you were looking into space, right, and certain other kind of like crazy technologies for many. I see it kind of feasible in a way. It's not only like Neil Stephenson's,
Yeah,
book
yeah.
talks about all this sci-fi. It seems like many years later it could be real. Uh, but I want to hear it from you. And why do you think space and not here? Because we're here on Earth. There is a lot of things that we need to solve at a local level. but we're investing some money in space to try to harness that energy, right? That all of a sudden all these data centers are hungry for. Um, yeah, can you tell us why space do you think can be a solution, and if not, like, what can we do here locally to actually harness the energy that we need, and how can we do that?
Yeah, honestly, I would love to just have a podcast on that with a number of people because we could take it in so many different directions. Um, so many different directions.
Yeah.
I've always liked space. I always was interested in space when I was younger. I think I watched every single sci-fi film, even the bad ones, the bad rated ones. And I'm an investor in Axiom Space, which is an incredible company. And so I was just personally interested because I think it's something that's unexplored. It's something that we are just starting to explore. Um, and I do, the more I read, obviously, the more I'm starting to realize, right? The convergence of energy and potentially all of these natural, resources that are in space that could actually also help us, right? I don't look at space as a way, not yet, at least, maybe because, I don't have that power of the purse like Elon Musk and the rest, where I look at space as like, oh, this is where we're going to migrate and live. I'm not there. I'm just curious around, um, because for me, when I grew up with Star Trek and Star Wars and everything else, and I feel like every single tool that those guys had in those films and in those series, right, is almost existing today. And so I feel like we do live in this kind of simulation of some sorts where everything we've seen in these sci-fi movies is going to come true. And even downloading the consciousness, the movie Her, right? I mean, there is a clinic in Arizona that's already working on this, right? There's things like Neuralink and similar, and I could just see how these, these things could potentially end up happening. In terms of, the bridging the gap here and there. First, I don't have that lens. I am always been very focused on here. It's part of the reason why I went to Africa and Latin America to do mobile payments and electricity development, right? Is because I believed in that sturdiness and developing something here. So to me, I don't really see it that way. I'm just investor in space because I think it's fascinating and it opens my mind to such possibilities. I did for a long time, which led me to that investment, have a very interesting thesis, and but which by which I lived for I would say good 15 years, 20 years, where and I've traveled a lot. I've lived in 16 different places in the world and
Wow.
I've visited over 80 countries. And I would go every time I would travel, I would find the tallest building in that place or a hill or wherever I was. If I was on the plains of Africa, I would find something, tall and I would go to the top and I would observe the world. And one, your perspective shifts about your own problems. You become more creative about what you need to do, and when you see how small you are, right, you tend to also think about things and people and maybe disagreements or possibilities in a very different way. And so for that reason, I always thought, we all need that perspective in life because we are only human and we get really engulfed in our emotions. And that if I could go to space one day, right, that would also give me complete different way to observe and to approach life. And so because I find the smallest possibilities in life, um as its biggest opportunities, and I latch on to that. And so that kind of height and removing myself from what is allows me to really kind of be better as a human being and do much better in life. So I think that's where my kind of passion for space comes from.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at things. I'll definitely try that next time I travel. Go the highest peak of that particular city or place, and then just kind of like meditate from from above to have a
Yeah.
different perspective. I like that very much. So yeah, so you were into sci-fi since you were very young. I'm sure you probably read quite a few books about sci-fi and many others. Can you recommend two or three books to our audience that they could read that can place them at least, or put them in a position to be knowledgeable about what's going on today?
Yeah, I mean, Ready Player One.
Okay, that's Neil
Um,
Stevenson, right?
yeah, uh, Three Body Problem, Chariots of Light. It's a Norwegian sci-fi writer. He's incredible. Talks about the chariots that Mayan civilization saw, right? And how they believe in outer space. So I
What's
would
the
say
name of it? What is the name again? Sorry.
Chariots of Light, I believe. I read it when I was like 18, so I have to look that up. But again, but I can post it on my Substack or
Yes.
your Substack or
Yeah.
something. I can
Let's do
post
that.
those for sure. So I would say those, and then I also get very large inspirations from poets too.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, like guys like Khalil Gibran,
yeah.
he's an incredible poet. So those
Yeah.
those kind of have shaped. I wish I could tell you now I read. Now I just feel like I read Substacks or Twitter or other things because I just don't have time. But
Yeah.
from my early age, because that was really pushed, I used to read like one or two books a week, and so that really shaped a lot of my thinking.
1, 2 books a week. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
was a really avid reader.
what do you do to relax? Read?
No, now I don't. Now I don't. Now, like I said, I don't really read anymore. I think it's really scary. I just read kind of articles written by
Yeah.
other people. I read a lot of geopolitical, newsletters. Yeah, it's scary, but I don't have a lot of time for books now.
Yeah, that leads me to another question. So we've seen Google and Facebook, they're in court. They're pretty much battling different lawsuits, a lot of them with regards to people being addicted to these technologies. And this is social media. Now we're getting into AI. We don't know what the repercussions are, but obviously there's going to be a lot of issues there. You just mentioned it. I mean, you used to read a lot, long format books, which is probably healthier for your brain than, just Twitter
Uh,
feeds. And well, Substack is probably the best out there.
yeah.
But still, like our brains are just not wired the way they should be, right? So what do you think people should do to try to stay or try to save themselves and their families from, all this craziness that technology is creating? I mean, it's very helpful. Obviously, you have made a living thanks to technology. I have made a living thanks to technology, but I have two kids and I keep them away from screens as much as possible. So what else can we do to save our little brains?
Yeah, it's hard, Yarrow, right?
Yeah.
Um because you could also argue that the younger generation now coming online and these kids are going to be so native to technology that's
Yeah.
almost going innate with them. Maybe in the next couple of years we'll even have Borgs, half human, half robot, right? I mean, who knows, right? How
Yeah.
the all this develops, and so what really fits, and I'm not sure that I am I that who are we in this older generation to say this is the way? However, I agree with you that it's already proven that the way our movies are today, the way cartoons are today, the way we get our, all these feeds and different inputs definitely creates anxiety and ADHD. That's a fact. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I would definitely try to have um off days with screen and check out. I just recently we went to Montana for skiing, and for 4 days I didn't look at, any Twitter, any emails, like nothing. And it was so um calming in the body. So I think once you realize that, right, then you kind of you realize that you need to step back. Now with AI, and a possibility to potentially create new companies and to be doing everything out of your living room, I think
Mhm.
people are even crazier, right? And I think people are spending more time in front of a computer. So I think it just depends where you are in your life,
Mhm.
what you're trying to build, what you're trying to learn. Um, I think it's still extremely important because I'm into longevity. I think it's very important to do functional training to keep yourself every time you fly, you need to really, try to detox from radiation. You need to open your, windows in the house. You have a lot of computers, and now these mini Mac studios,
Mm.
will work, and tons of Wi-Fi in the house. So you have to seek balance. I think people have to seek balance. Otherwise, your health will suffer, because we are not AI, and we are only little humans that still, to this age, to this day, we have invented that longevity pill that will keep us, alive to 120. We're search for that. And so until that happens, I think people are going to have to take a break and just realize that not everything is on the screen, and you have to go and touch some grass, or go
Yeah.
swim in the ocean.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Maya. It's been more than, the time that you gave me. Thank you for staying with me and for providing all that valuable information. Hopefully we get to do it again. Maybe next time we can do it in Spanish as well.
Oh,
That'll be
sounds good.
interesting.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And then we can definitely share some of the resources and some of the information you share. We can put them on a Substack and send it to everybody.
Sounds good. All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good
Thank you
one.
everybody for joining us. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.